Pop quiz! Do you know which Formula 1 circuit was dramatically shortened from a jaw-dropping 12 kilometers to just 4.5 kilometers? This legendary racetrack was once a stage for heart-pounding races and historic moments, from Michael Schumacher's 2004 victory to Jochen Rindt's incredible debut. But now it stands abandoned in the mysterious Black Forest, prepared to discover the dramatic events, record-breaking speeds, and a surprising twist that led to this captivating racetrack's mysterious transformation. This is the story of the Hockenheimring. It's 1932, and the world of motor racing is about to get a thrilling new chapter, thanks to a man with a stopwatch and a dream. Yes, you heard that right. A stopwatch. Ernst Christ, not your typical daredevil or a grease-stained mechanic, but a timekeeper from Hockenheim, decided that his quaint German hometown needed something a bit more exhilarating than the usual Sunday church bell chimes. So, he did what any sensible man with a stopwatch and a wild idea would do. He designed a racetrack. Now, this wasn't any ordinary racetrack, named the Dreieckskurs, which, for those not fluent in the poetic language of German, translates to the triangle course. It stretched over a jaw-dropping 12 kilometers of pure, unadulterated racing thrill, winding through the scenic German countryside. This was a significant shift from European racing circuits, which typically averaged 5 to 8 kilometers in length at the time. On top of that, the Dreieckskurs boasted 9 turns, each one a dance between danger and skill, a test of mettle for the bravest of drivers. And let's not forget, this was the 1930s, a time when safety in racing was commonly considered as a vegetarian option at a butcher's convention.
Where is the line drawn? Where does it begin?
At this time, racing fatalities were not uncommon, with the decade seeing a rate of approximately 16 deaths per year globally in motorsport. It's like taking the scenic route to your own potential demise. Fast forward to 1938, the world was on the brink of monumental change. But so was the Dreieckskurs. The track underwent its first major facelift, transforming from the sprawling triangle into something a bit more curvaceous. Enter the Ostkurve, a curve so bodacious it would make its mark in racing history. The track, now christened the Kurzweltring, shrank to a more modest 7.5 kilometers. But this new, compact version was no less difficult. It was like trading a marathon for a sprint. The intensity just rocketed up. As for what spurred this transformation, just a little competition from Germany's highway system, the Autobahn. You see, back in the late 1930s, when the Hockenheimring was still finding its feet, or should we say, its corners, the construction of the new Mannheim-Walldorf motorway, part of the Autobahn network, brought about a significant change. This new speedy highway ran cheekily close to the track, almost like a high-speed interloper challenging the circuit to a duel of relevance. It basically went up and said to the Hockenheimring, "Anything you can do, I can do faster." And thus, the Hockenheimring responded by tightening its curves and shortening its length. The result? A more compact, intense racing experience that still kept the adrenaline pumping, but in a more, shall we say, intimate setting. Accordingly, this era of pre-war racing at the Hockenheimring was less Formula 1 and more Formula YOLO! A wild, unchecked experiment in speed and engineering. Cars were less about aerodynamics and more about strapping an engine to 4 wheels and hoping for the best. In fact, aerodynamics was just a fancy word for, does this thing move faster if I scream? The drivers, like knights of old, donned not armor, but overalls and leather helmets, charging down the straights and wrestling their machines around the bends. It was raw, it was unrefined, and by today's standards, absolutely bonkers. But that was the charm of it! The Hockenheimring in those early years was more than just a racetrack. It was a character in its own right, a living, breathing entity that echoed with the roars of engines and the cheers of crowds. It was a place where legends began to take shape, where the foundations of racing lore were laid down, one hair-raising lap at a time. As the 1940s dawned, the world, and indeed the Hockenheimring, found themselves in the throes of World War II, a period that was as kind to racing tracks as a bull in a china shop. The war left the Hockenheimring, much like my attempts at baking, in a bit of a sorry state. Tanks, those not-so-gentle giants of warfare, had trampled the track, turning it into something resembling a ploughed field rather than a racing circuit. But you know what they say about German efficiency. It's not just a stereotype. By 1947, mere 2 years after the war's end, the motorsport enthusiasts in the region, who probably missed the smell of burning rubber more than anything, got together with a rallying cry, "Auf geht's! Bauen wir das wieder auf!" And so, the Hockenheimring GmbH was born, a company dedicated not just to rebuilding the track, but to ensuring its financial and operational stability. It was like a phoenix rising from the ashes, except this phoenix smelled like motor oil and had a need for speed. On May 11th, 1947, the engines roared back to life around the Hockenheimring, a sound that was probably music to the ears of every racing fan in the vicinity. And within the span of a decade, the track went from looking more like a backdrop for a war movie to hosting one of the creme de la creme events in motorcycle racing, the German Motorcycle Grand Prix of 1957. It was like a scene from Greece, but with more leather and less singing. Fans flocked in, clad in leather jackets, their eyes sparkling with the same intensity as the polished chrome on the bikes. Now, when it came to the racing season, it was as serious as a dentist's appointment, with bikes in every size imaginable: 500cc, 350cc, 250cc, 125cc, even the quirky sidecar 500cc, for those who wanted a +1 on their high-speed adventures. But the 500cc class, that was less of a race and more of a royal rumble on two wheels. Picture riders like Libero Liberati, Bob McIntyre, John Surtees, and Jeff Duke. Not just guys with cool names, but legends representing the Ferraris of motorcycles, from Gilera to MV Augusta and Norton. It was like the Daytona 500 mixed with a dash of Mad Max, and these riders were the road warriors. The Hockenheimring provided the perfect asphalt stage for the high-octane drama. Once a triangle, then an oval, it had seen more makeovers than a reality TV star. But by this point, it was clear that the track was back, revving louder, shining brighter, and ready for its Formula One encore. 1970, Hockenheimring. If you weren't there, you missed out. Over 100,000 fans gathered to see the track's debut, probably thinking they were at a rock concert, only to see Jochen Rindt in a Lotus Ford performing an automotive ballet and clinching victory. It was the Hockenheimring's "Hello, Formula One" moment. And what an entrance it was. This victory was significant, not just for the track, but also for Rindt, who tragically died later that year at Monza, and became the only driver to win the World Championship posthumously. It was a bittersweet triumph etched in racing history, reminding us that legends never truly fade away. But let's talk about the Hockenheimring's unique personality during that era. It was basically like the mullet hairstyle of racetracks. Business in the front with the technical motordrome, party in the back with those wildly long straights through the forest. Covering a length of 6.7 kilometers, it was a circuit that didn't know whether it wanted to be a high-speed drag strip or a dance floor. And the best part? This was the first time the track was run clockwise, giving it a fresh twist, literally. Now, the 70s at the Hockenheimring weren't just about throwing caution to the wind and racing like there's no tomorrow, although there was plenty of that. Post-1968, following Jim Clark's tragic accident, the track got a safety makeover. Think chicanes and crash barriers, the motor racing equivalent of bubble wrapping your china. These were the first steps in taming the wild stallion that was the Hockenheimring. Fast forward to 1980, when another tragedy struck. Patrick DePaler, two-time GP winner and all-round speedster, tragically loses his life during testing. The track responded with a new chicane at Oscurve in 1982, and the ones that already existed got a bit of tightening. The new chicanes, named Bremskurve 1, 2, and 3, were modified several times over the years, with variants for both car and motorcycle races. What was once a straightforward sprint through the forest now had more zigzags than the plot of a Sherlock Holmes novel. Despite these changes, the Hockenheimring's essence remained as steadfast as a British Guard outside Buckingham Palace. It retained its mix of straights and bends, continuing to challenge the bravest of drivers, and probably causing a few to question their life choices mid-lap. The 1980s at the Hockenheimring, a time when Formula One was as turbocharged as a double espresso on a Monday morning. This was an age where the engineers, having apparently never heard the phrase "less is more," decided that if a 1500cc engine was good, strapping a turbo to it and making it as powerful as a 3000cc engine would be even better. The result? Cars that were as temperamental as a cat on a hot tin roof, but oh, could they fly? The turbo era's piece de resistance was its sheer power. We're talking about engines quoting up to 1,000 brake horsepower, and even more in qualifying trim. However, with great power came great challenges, notably the infamous turbo lag. So a driver steps on the throttle, waits a moment, and then gets hit with the power like a sledgehammer. This led to some interesting moments on the track, especially for those unaccustomed to such a fierce power delivery. This was somewhat mitigated by the introduction of twin-turbo engines in 1979, but the lag, like an unwanted guest never truly left the party. But there's more! Fuel restrictions added another layer of drama to the Hockenheimring's turbo era. Imagine being in a race car capable of mind-bending speeds, but having to keep one eye on the fuel gauge like a worried dad on a family road trip. In 1984, teams were limited to 220 litres of fuel per race, which was then reduced to 195 litres in 86 and a measly 150 litres by 88, as you can imagine. This led to some strategic headaches for the teams and drivers alike. One of the most memorable incidents of this era occurred in 1986, starring none other than Alain Prost. During the race, Prost found himself in a bit of a pickle as his car, much like a guest at an all-you-can-eat buffet, ran out of fuel just before the finish line. Despite this hiccup, Prost still managed to secure a valuable championship point, proving that sometimes just crawling over the finish line is enough. As the 20th century gave its final bow, the Hockenheimring stood at a crossroads. It was time for a major shake-up, a facelift that would drag this aging star of the racing world into the new millennium. The catalyst for this change was the controversial 2000 German Grand Prix, a race sprinkled with plot twists worthy of a Hollywood blockbuster. The most dramatic of these was a security breach. An ousted Mercedes-Benz employee, in a move that would make a Bond villain proud, breached the track's security barriers, leading to the deployment of the safety car. This twist of fate played a pivotal role in one of the most spectacular comebacks in F1 history. Rubens Barrichello's victory from 18th on the grid actually proved that 007 is not the only one with a license to thrill. This event, coupled with a layout that left most of the overtaking action hidden in the forest, away from the prying eyes of spectators, was a wake-up call. The FIA called for major improvements to spectator viewing, safety, and security. The Hockenheimring needed to evolve or risk becoming a relic of a bygone era. Enter Hermann Tilke, the circuit designer extraordinaire, tasked with bringing the Hockenheimring to the 21st century. Tilke faced a Herculean challenge. The aim was to shorten the track from its lengthy 6.8 kilometers to a more contemporary 4.5 kilometers, improve conditions for overtaking, and retain the circuit's defining characteristics. The redesign process was a collaboration between Tilke's expertise, the management of Hockenheimring, and inputs from drivers, including Michael Schumacher. The result? A circuit that maintained its soul. The iconic stadium section and the right-hand Nord curve, but said goodbye to the long forest straights. The new layout featured a long straight, the Parabolica, leading into a tight hairpin before snaking back to the atmospheric stadium section, culminating in a 4.57 kilometer lap. While some drivers, like Juan Pablo Montoya and Ron Dennis, mourn the loss of the old track, the new design was met with enthusiasm for its modernity and improved racing dynamics. The overhaul, which cost a staggering €62 million, also included new grandstands, boosting the capacity from 83,000 to a remarkable 120,000 spectators. Because in the fast-paced world of Formula 1, you either keep up with the times or you risk being left behind. Now, let's zoom into the present day at the Hockenheimring, shall we? Today, this grand old lady of the racing world is more versatile than a Swiss Army knife. Sure, it's still got its racing chops, but it's also moonlighting as a concert venue, festival ground, and just about anything else you can throw a checkered flag at. Think of it as the life of the party, if the party were hosted in a place where you could go from zero to hero in a few seconds flat. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through the Hockenheimring's rich history and its exciting present. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories from the world of motorsport.